Good evening, guys. Let's give them a hand. So I will let them introduce themselves. So
I'm Darin Anthony.
Hi, Richey Nash.
So we're going to start with story and script and how it kind of came to be in that phase first. So Richey, maybe start with where the story came from and what was your idea of and motivated you to then eventually write the script?
The story, I'm a former baseball player myself, so that's sort of where the story began. I always wanted to write something that, was sort of in the world of baseball. And that's where it started, and this is where it ended. That's kind of the long and short of it. I just basically started writing. I had an idea of what the character was going to be, but I didn't really know where the story was going to go. And that's just sort of evolved as I was writing it.
And then how long was the writing process for you? Did you crank it out in one draft, or was it 50 drafts?
Oh, yeah, it was one draft, sure.
Yeah,
one draft.
absolutely, absolutely.
No, it was many drafts over several years, yeah.
Okay. And then was this your first feature film?
Yes, first feature. That's both of our first features, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice. So give him a hand for that.
Thanks. Thank you.
So once the script came to be, did you guys already knew you were going to work together, or this is something like you met in the pre-production phase? How did your guys' relationship come to be?
Well, we actually knew each other from theater, and we met in 2004, something like that. Yeah, so we'd known each other for years and worked together a bunch. I directed Richey in some plays and some readings, and so there was actually a time early on when we were doing a trailer for the movie, and my wife was going to be the producer of the movie, and so she actually helped Richey do the trailer, and we went and shot that out in Rancho Cucamonga or San Bernardino, and I helped out on that. I didn't direct or anything, but I helped out and as much as I could, and then I don't know, a couple of years later.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, Darin's wife got pregnant and then decided that she was going to have to bow out of the project.
Yeah.
You son of a.
And she was pregnant with number 2 while we were shooting this.
Yeah, that's true.
That's awesome.
Once I got around to finally getting a thing in production, I sort of knew I had an idea that I wanted to, if it wasn't going to be a $10 million film, I wanted it to, and I, have, whoever directed, some big name, that I was going to want to direct it myself, or even better, co-direct it, so that I could have somebody else, on the other side, helping me out. Because I just knew that, it being an indie shoot and with everything involved, it was a pretty involved shoot, that we weren't going to have time for me to, shoot a scene, watch it on the monitor, shoot a scene, watch. We were going to have to move faster. So I needed somebody that I trusted behind the camera, and like Darin said, we'd worked together before as director and actor. So I thought, that's a really good, I think maybe that's a really good choice in terms of a combination of two directors. So.
Yeah. Nice. Can you talk a little bit about the pre-production phase of this project? We were talking in the green room. A baseball movie, like a period piece, comes with a lot of extra baggage, so to say. So what was that process like for you? Where did you shoot? Things like that.
We shot the whole thing in Kentucky. Yeah. Which is where I grew up. I remember in pre-production, or I would even call it development, really. Yeah. I probably about 7 or 8 months before we started shooting the movie, I went back to Kentucky, and in my home, this minor league ballpark is in my hometown. And so I said, I'm going to go to this ballpark, I'm going to talk to the team, and because that's step one. If that happens, then the movie will happen. Yeah. If they say no and they're not going to help us, they're not going to be helpful at all, and they're going to charge us, $5,000 a day to shoot at the stadium, then the movie's not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen here. Right. So that was the first thing I did. and we got really lucky. We had the president of the team was completely on board. Could not have been more helpful.
Yeah.
Other than if they would have, financed the whole film, that would have been more helpful. But yeah, they were just really super terrific, and that's a big reason for the movie getting made. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as sort of pre-production, one of the things that we ended up happening was Richey went back to Kentucky for 3.5 months before the shoot, and since I had kids and whatnot, and I wasn't able to go, and so we were sort of forced to hash out the script on the phone, and I'd be calling Richey late at night, and he'd already put in about a 12 or 14-hour day, running around, checking locations, talking to people, and I'd be like, all right, Richey, let's talk about these lines here. I'd be like, oh man, I'm so tired. I'm like, oh, that's okay. And so that was sort of our process. And then I got to work with Lincoln, our cinematographer, here, and then sort of relay all of that back to Richey, as sort of like, this is what we're thinking, this is the way we're going, blah, blah. And
we also had some difficulties with video conferencing.
Yes.
I just can't figure that thing out.
That didn't work out very well. And then there was some final casting here. But one of the things that we learned, I think maybe a couple weeks before we were going to start shooting, we got some great news that the Lexington Legends, which is the home team, were going to give us any uniform we wanted. All the uniforms we wanted were like fantastic uniforms. And then the down...
Let us use them. They weren't going to give them to us.
They were going to let us use them. And then the downside was, or good side, depending on how you want to look at it, the Power, which would be the team that they were playing 3 days before we started principal shooting, they were going to give us uniforms as well. They were going to give us 5 uniforms. And I don't know if you guys know baseball well enough, but that's not enough to field a team. So that made us have to think about just how we were going to shoot that. So I don't know if you noticed some of the shots, but first off, we had a magic editor, Harry, and he made this thing look great. So we were able to splice in shots of, all right, we've got these guys in the outfield, and that guy at second base, and this guy at third. And that's 4 of our uniforms, and then we had to move the camera. So we're always having people run around, but we came up with the idea of Rip seeing just the pitcher in that moment there because from Rip's point of view, looking out in the field, we could not have enough players out there. So we had to come up with that. And then we had to get rid of the whole crowd and all of that, which was sort of theatrical magic as well, because it was lower the camera, run, move, lift the camera, nobody's there. So there was some fun stuff that had to happen.
Nice. That's the creative end from the director's standpoint. As we've been sharing in other panels about producers, producer's job is to put out all the fires during production that they don't know are going to be fires. So as producers and directors, what are some of those stories that you can share, other like costumes and stuff that you're like, okay, this is a thing that we had to solve and we have a half an hour to solve it?
Yeah, we talked about this before. We had an incredibly smooth shoot. And
that's amazing.
It was amazing. It was amazing because we were sort of, it's like going over that roller coaster. You're sitting at the top and you're like, okay, here we go, and then you go down and it's like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
No. Well, and we had a couple of, because we had a lot of novices ourselves, mainly in some of the producers, but we had a great first AD. George had done 10, 15 independent films. And so he was really on top of what needed to happen. And he was extremely helpful to me because he would sort of whisper in my ear, okay, we need to get that shot. We don't have rips. Oh, okay, right, yeah. All right, let's get that. Let's turn it around. So that was extremely helpful to have somebody who was there every day, who knew exactly what they were doing, and then he had his, connection. So his second was great, and we had great sort of grips and gaffers, and those guys were just wonderful.
Yeah, that was probably one of the obstacles. I think we started off. Like Darin said, we had a great first AD. We had a pretty experienced cinematographer who we brought out from LA, who incidentally grew up in Kentucky, which was one of the reasons why he really wanted to work on it. Then we had a bunch of sort of post-grad video students from Kentucky. There's no film school in Kentucky.
Yeah, no.
It's it's like what is the major? It's like video something or other.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you had a lot of these guys. They were kids and learning on the job while we're learning on the job. So
Some of them were running to class, like, I can do the first 2 weeks, and then I got class starts, so I can show up on Wednesday night and Friday.
Yeah,
Like,
it was crazy. So it was kind of crazy in that regard. But by the end, it's like all these guys, these kids working on the movie, and all these people who hadn't really done film before. It was just like running like a well-oiled machine. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I can't. The only thing that was really scary was there was a point about 3 weeks. I think it was maybe two weeks away from shooting where we got a call from the team president saying that minor league baseball had a problem with some of the script.
Yes.
And because they needed to approve the script, minor league baseball did, and so we had given it to them like several weeks before, and then they waited until a couple of weeks to say, oh, we have a few objections, and we got completely freaked out. And we like ran over to the stadium to have this big meeting, and then it's like, oh, they don't want you to have this scene. They don't want beer to be in the locker room. And we're like, oh, okay, fine, that's just fine.
We'll cut that, no problem.
So yeah, it was a scare, but it didn't really change anything that much.
Nice. So a little bit about directing. How did you guys obviously had a past relationship, but was there shorthand that you felt like got you through the long days? Did you feel like there was times where you could just go, Darin had it today and you didn't have to put the director hat on so much, Richey, or do you felt like it was 50-50?
Yeah, I think there were certain days a bit like that. Certain days more where there were very few days that I wasn't in front of the camera. There were a couple.
Well, and like day one, we sat down with the cast and crew and talked to them, and I was like, Darin is the director. If you have any director questions, ask him. If you have any producer questions, ask somebody other than Richey. Richey's an actor on the set. And so that was the most important thing for me. It was like, he needs to be able to act and not be burdened with those things when he's doing scenes. And certainly he, for the most part, took my word for it. He always looked at the frame and said, okay, yeah, that looks great, good. Where am I?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be there, great. And then from there, it was me directing the actors, and occasionally Richey would say something, but he was almost never directing while acting. He wasn't sort of breaking that trust with the other actors, which was, I think,
that was something
nice
we had
thing.
set up before, is that, we talked about how we would work on set, and that was a big thing, obviously, for Darin. He wanted to sort of shield me from a lot of the stuff so that I could concentrate, and that was nice to have. So basically, we would shoot, and we would get there. We would get on set, and we would all get together, and we would compose the shots before we started. So, we would all do that, and then I would go off and sort of get ready for the thing. And then when we would shoot, we would shoot a scene, and then he and I would talk. Okay, what do we think? What do we want to do? And then he would be the one to go out into the set. So, because I didn't want that, like you said, I didn't want to be the guy who was on set directing the person I'm in the scene with.
Yeah.
So that's the way we sort of set it up at the beginning, and it worked out pretty well for the most part. Yeah.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit about your producing team? So when you were the actor on set, you didn't have to worry about lunch being there on time and everything else. Who were your other kind of co-producers?
Yeah, I found three willing willing people
Yeah.
in Kentucky who none of which had ever worked on a film. Two had never worked anywhere in the entertainment industry at all, and the other had been a segment producer for the local PBS station for many years. So at least she had some idea of what it took to sort of produce things. So we got to a certain point in pre-production. I think we were about maybe a month away from shooting, and it was just like, it was getting to be so overwhelming with everything, because here I was a first-time feature producer, writer, director, producer, and all that, and I'm here with three people who'd never done a film before. So I was like, this isn't going to happen. This movie isn't going to happen. And that's about that time is when I sort of had got on the phone with a buddy of mine back here in LA, who is a producer, and I'm like, man, I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't. And he's worked in this sort of budget range before, and bigger budgets too. And he was like, yeah, I might be able to come down there and help you. I was like, please, please, please come help. And so that was sort of the turning point in pre-production, is Jimmy signed on to produce the film with me. And he came in the next week, spent a week, then came back, and then came back to LA for a bit, and then came back down a couple weeks before we started shooting. And he was able to sort of lift a big burden off of my shoulders, because he had done it before, and I was just sort of kind of learning as I went. And I'd learned a whole hell of a lot, and I had these three people that were helping me out too. But it was just great, because then I could sort of concentrate on other things.
Nice. Maybe 3 nuggets or so of wisdom maybe you got from watching Jimmy, or now that you've done this process, you're like, for someone who's like maybe done a short film, who's looking to do a feature, these are things that they need to remember, be conscious of.
That I learned from Jimmy,
or just learned in the process of doing it.
Don't ever get drunk on the job. Don't try to handle payroll yourself. That's a big one.
Yes,
Don't,
a lot of work.
Don't try to do that. Just have somebody else do the payroll. It just makes your life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. Refrigerators make a lot of noise in bars.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, the bar scene with Rip and his brother was our first shot. First night, was it like, I don't know, we started that night at midnight, 12:30 or something like that. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of overnights, and we were unaware of just how loud those refrigerators were. So we shot all of that, shot that whole night, and basically had to loop the whole thing, because the refrigerators were just, it just destroyed it. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know. Yeah. Everybody was sort of learning, and I was like, so next time we unplugged the refrigerators that we were when we were in bars. So. Yeah,
Jimmy was great, because he just logistically, like he was really good at knowing what needed to happen when, and on set too, things like, mm-hmm. You need to Greek that sign or something like, things like that. Just the little things that he would catch that maybe would have sort of flown under the radar, and then we would have been stuck with it later, having a problem with it later. So.
Yeah, lower that shot so you don't get ESPN on the TV.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah.
I was like,
nice.
Good. Thanks.
We're going to end a little bit with casting, because obviously we're an audience of actors, so we're always curious of how that process goes. You being an actor yourself, you understand what it's like to come in a room and audition. How did you then want to set up the audition room to have actors have a safe space to do the best work? How conscious of you were that?
Yeah, that was a big thing for me. What happened was I went back to Kentucky, and I ran all the the local auditions in Kentucky, and all the main characters were basically flown in from here, from LA, and a couple of them we knew.
So that means we still want LA actors.
Yes, we do. A couple of them we already knew; they were friends. Like
Yeah.
Peter Van Norden, who played the principal, was a good friend of mine and Darin's both. Travis Schultz, who plays my brother in the film. Darin's worked with several times. I've worked with, I've been friends with him for a while. And then an interesting story about Abby Wathan. I always call her Wathan, but I think it's Wathan. She contacted me. She saw the breakdown, contacted me, somehow got my email or something and contacted me. And said, "Hey, I live in LA, but I'm from Lexington, Kentucky too," because she saw where they were shooting, and we were holding auditions here. Darin was holding auditions for Sam, the lead female, and we actually weren't auditioning that role here. We were auditioning that role in Kentucky.
Yeah, it was going to be a local role.
Yeah, and so I said, well, we're going to do that as a local hire. But if you want, I can send you over to Darin. And she's like, well, I can work local in Kentucky because I'm from there. So I sent her to Darin when we were auditioning for Sam, and he put her on tape for Tina, and she just blew it out of the water.
Great.
She was
wonderful,
by far the best.
Super charming when
person
she
we saw.
walked in the room, and easy. And
Yeah. But yeah, when we ran a lot of auditions in Kentucky for a lot of the bit parts and day player stuff, and there was a lot of inexperienced actors there. But we had actually ended up casting 3 SAG actors in Kentucky. And, a lot of those people weren't terribly experienced at auditioning and things like that. But that, I'm very conscious about, running an audition where people could feel comfortable and, could do their best work. Because, I know how that is. I know it's tough. And when you walk into a room and there's a bunch of stone faces, it makes it that much harder.
Well, the last question is, as an actor, sometimes we don't see the big picture that directors see when they're casting. We, connecting families together and things like that. So what are some of the things you're like, they did a great job, but they just wasn't
well,
quite
one of the
right.
things I think, stand up, Richey. Stand up. So there's somewhat of a difference between Richey and I. So as you can see, so casting somebody to play opposite Richey was, one of the great things about Courtney is she's 5'10". So I was auditioning her. I was like, all right, Courtney, now this is what I want you to do, and it was great. She was charming and wonderful and tall, and there were probably 3 or 4 ladies that it came down to, and it was like, she's right and she's the right height, and
Yeah, and that's
just
sometimes
sort of,
what it comes down to.
we weren't replacing him.
4 inches taller, so I'm going to go with her.
So that was definitely one of the things that was, and of course there were, I think you had to make the choice about her son.
Yeah.
Which was
not
necessarily, if you're looking closely.
Right. Yeah, there's, we auditioned several kids in Kentucky, and not a lot of them were sort of up for the task.
Yeah.
The kid we did cast, he didn't necessarily match her.
Her coloring.
Her coloring,
if you will.
but
red hair, she had black hair.
When we first got on set with that scene, she was like, "This kid cannot be my child." Like, just work with it.
Just work with it. Give it your best. Give it your best.
But yeah, so some of the roles, it was like kind of slim pickings. You were kind of like, okay, he's the only one. He's the only one who's going to be able to do it. So he's cast.
Yeah.
And then other roles, you're like, oh wow, well, we could cast any one of these 3 people, and I think they would all be great. And that even locally, it came, a couple of the choices were kind of hard because, the actors were good, all of them were good. But it just came down to a look, and it was sort of we were going for this sort of small town feel kind of thing, and certain people kind of had that, and certain people didn't. So.
Let's give them a hand one more time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming, everyone.